and besides them, of course, keep Jessie on. She goes in a week from tomorrow to start a pretty heavy round of chemo. She'll be in the hospital doing that for 3 to 5 days, and then it'll be a couple of weeks. She does that every 3 weeks for a while. So remember her in your prayers, especially next week. I did get a text right after church that Kaylee had a bad, we talk about a bad headache. She had a bad headache. And so they called and they told them to bring her back to Riley. So she headed back over to Riley this afternoon. And so we need to pray for her again. Kaylee McGinney, I think is how you say her last name. And then, of course, Randy he's kind of down with it. He's tested twice. He does not have COVID, but he's got a bad sinus infection. So he's doctoring for that. And then don't forget about Marianne Jones. She goes in for her follow-up doctor's appointment this week. And so hopefully she'll be able to get out and around and all that after that. I did not hear who the crowd said today at church as I was watching that. And I couldn't watch when everybody else was, just to kind of make you, in case you were wondering why I wasn't on there commenting and things, because I use the same Facebook account. This is the same account now that was used this morning to broadcast. And so I was afraid if I tried to sign on through this account that it would shut down the broadcast. So I waited till after church was over and then watched it. But anyway, I couldn't hear who they were telling Jeff to add to the prayer list. So if you know, that's good. If you don't, then we just pray for whoever was added. So let's go ahead and pray. Father, we thank you for this beautiful afternoon, Lord, and for this chance to be together, even though some of us are quarantined, Lord, and we just ask that you touch us and be with us tonight as we go through your word. We pray for all that we've talked about, Lord. One that's recuperating from surgery, a little girl, and one of the women of the church, those that have chemo, those with injuries, Carol, with her shoulder injury, and just all the rest, Lord. And we just pray for this family that's grieving, that your peace and comfort will be with them, Lord, and just ask that you just watch over all of us. For we all just fall upon your mercy and look to your grace. And all these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty. So we are in 27:30. And that's Genesis 27:30. Now, we just finished up the last time talking about the what some people call the deception of Abraham. You can call it a lot of different things. The ones that don't want to make Jacob look bad, they just call it, like in my Bible, it just says Jacob gets Isaac's blessing, and there was Jacob, he thought he was going to, Isaac thought he was going to die. He knew that his time was about over. And, he didn't know, do I have a couple of days? Do I have a couple of months? Do I have a few years? But he couldn't take a chance on waiting in order to give the blessing. So he decides, I better get that done. And so he sends Esau out to hunt, bring him some game. Of course, Rebecca hears about it. She's the one that actually pulled all the deception. She sends Jacob to get a couple of calves, or a couple of goats. She slaughters them, fixes them the way that her husband liked it, and then after that, she made the skin into basically gloves for Jacob, so that he would be hairy like his brother, and put some on the back of his neck and all that. And Jacob went in, gave his father the food, and received the blessing of the firstborn. And so anyway, that's kind of where we're at. And we just finished up with the blessing. And basically, what Isaac tells him is that may you have good crops, may you have rain, may you have new crops every year. Nations are going to bow down to you. Your brothers or your mother's sons. Well, and even though he's only got one mother, there's only one at this time. In other words, all of the descendants that come from Isaac will bow down to Jacob, and so one of the main Jewish blessings, those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. And that was something that was said to Abraham and to Isaac and now to Jacob. And it's something that we see that has been a part of history. All those that seem to bless the Jewish people end up, as a people, they end up doing well. Those as a people who curse and do wrong to the Jewish people usually suffer for it. And we could go in, I could spend 2 hours going into all that, but I won't. So just, you can trust me, or you can ask me for more details later. I'll be glad to share them with you. So that's where we're at. That's why we're getting ready to start. So we'll start reading with verse 30. After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, "My father, sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing." His father Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" "I am your son," he answered, "your firstborn, Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him. And indeed, he will be blessed." So, Esau's out. And just to kind of put it, we call him Esau. His name was actually what we would have called him literally would have been red or hairy. The words are really close to each other. And which, goes all the way back to the lentil stew. It's red. And they make a comment about him being red when he was born. They made a comment about him being red and hairy. And that's why he was named that. His people, the Edomites, they end up being called, that name, it stands for red and all of that too. So, we talked last time about how Rebecca was really in a hurry to get the food cooked, to get Isaac in there, or to get Jacob into Isaac and all of that, because you don't know when somebody's hunting game, they may be successful really quickly, and it may take some time. And so she was trying to hurry around, even as much time, and it took a while to get it done. By the time you go get 2 goats, slaughter them, cook them, prepare them, serve them, all that stuff takes time. And it's not done in 15 or 20 minutes. And so her concerns about hurrying were justified, because we are told that Jacob had scarcely left his father when when Esau came in from hunting, because he'd already hunted, been back, cleaned the game, cooked it, and now came to serve it as soon as his brother had left. And so it says, he too prepared some safety food, brought it to his father. Then he said to him, he's all pumped up, he's ready, he's got the game, he's going to get the blessing. Man, this is a good day. So he says to him, "Father, sit up, eat some of my game, so that you can give me your blessing." And which confounds Isaac pretty well, because Isaac says, and this is another thing that just shows us that his sight was gone, maybe his hearing a little bit too, because he asked his son, "Now, how many of you would know the voice of your child?" Or you think you would. You definitely know their face. And here, we read what the whole thing with Jacob and kind of the deception that was going on. He knew what he felt like, he knew what he smelled like, he knew what he sounded like. And at one time he'd known what he looked like. Well, here, he thought he's already heard him, smelled him, touched him. So he says, "Who are you?" And Esau answers, "I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau." Now, that was a deception in itself, because he was the firstborn, he was the oldest. We talked about that with when we started off the chapter, that he was the older son, but remember, he gave up his birthright. He gave up the whole idea of being the firstborn. He sold that over a bowl of porridge, stew, bean soup, whatever you want to call it. And so, he's going to get mad about Jacob and deceiving, but here he is also deceiving. He is assuming, and he doesn't want his father to know, or he is assuming that Isaac doesn't know, and he doesn't want him to know that he gave up the rights to the blessing. He's already turned those over to Jacob with the whole stew thing. So he has no right. But here, either he's just being flippant about it, he's being deceptive about it, or it's just one of those things where he's not even thinking about it, or thinking that what he did and what he said to his brother didn't matter, because he calls himself the firstborn. He doesn't call him the older son. I'm your firstborn, because the firstborn is supposed to get the blessing. So verse 33 says that when Isaac heard it, he trembled violently. He just basically shook all over. And, it's a couple of those things one of them that I think is a good assessment is, have you ever been that mad? So mad that you shake all over. Or one of the other possibilities is that he realizes he made a mistake. He screwed things up in his mind anyway. Now, we know he was following the plan of God. He didn't know that at the time. And that whole idea of messing things up, of not going according to protocol or customs or anything like that, just really upset him. Or the fact that he was so distraught that he had been deceived by his son that he couldn't tell one son from another. Whatever it was, the Bible doesn't say. But he shook all over. And then asked the question, like we all would, well, if this is you, who is that? And who was it that hunted the game and brought it to me? If you didn't hunt the game and brought it, somebody brought me game. He didn't, Rebecca had done such a good job of cooking it, even at this point, Isaac doesn't realize it was 2 domestic goats. And he said, because I ate it before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed. We've talked before about when you give a true blessing in God's name, and through the Spirit, or as it said in the beginning of the chapter that Isaac said, I want to bless you from my soul. When you give that kind of a blessing, there's power in it. And it's just like any words that come out of our mouths. We cannot put them back. And so he's saying he was blessed, and blessed he will be. I cannot take it back. Now, one thing that makes you wonder, would he have said the same thing if it had been one of the servants that came in? One of the servants heard the conversation between Esau and Isaac, and the servant went off and cooked the food and flavored it up the way that Isaac liked it. And the servant was the one that put on the skins and went in and deceived him and got the blessing. Do you think it really would have stood then? Would Isaac have had the same mentality that, well, I blessed this person, and so that blessing is there? It's possible, but I just can't see that would happen. So, but here Isaac says he's blessed, and blessed he will be. In other words, I'm not taking it back. Now, some people say that he's basically saying, well, the damage is done. It's already been passed. If it's just between the sons of my family, that's the way that it's going to be. Because it's indeed he will be blessed. No, there's no gray area. There is nothing to take back. There is nothing to rescind. It's done. And so Esau burst out with a loud and bitter cry. He realizes he has lost it all. and that he has lost his place. And maybe that bitter cry was because he realizes what he did with that bowl of stew when he gave that up. And, he says to his father, bless me to my father. He says, you got to bless me. Everybody depended upon a blessing. And so, he says, you got to bless me. Surely there's something there. And he said, Isaac actually tells him, I think we'd quit reading there. I'm gonna start reading again with 34. Then Esau heard his father's words. He burst out with a loud and bitter cry, and he said to my father, bless me too, my father. But Isaac said, your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. And Esau said, isn't he rightly named Jacob? He has deceived me these 2 times. He took my birthright, now he's taken my blessing. Then he asked, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? Isaac answered Esau, I have made him lord over you, and have made all of his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. Then Esau wept aloud. So, Esau is totally distraught. And, we talked last time about it's not really over the money. Isaac at that time, just like Abraham, was probably one of the richest men in the area, if not the richest man in the area. All because we know that everything that Abraham had, Abraham doled a little bit out of to his other children, but he gave the majority of it to Isaac. And Isaac was a good businessman. And we're told that he was blessed by God, that he had crops when nobody else had crops, and all those kind of things. So he's also a very, very wealthy person. And it's kind of like, you take the example we used last time was, he would have been on the level of a Bill Gates. And Bill Gates had 2 kids, has 2 kids. He gave a lot to them as they were growing up and made them a company, gave them their own shares and all that. And then there's a big deal about, he and his wife had set up a foundation for all their money, and that was all going to go to that. But their kids are already very wealthy. If you've got $1 billion and you're going to divide that, and one kid gets 60 billion, the other gets 600 million, the other gets 400 million. Do you think there's really an issue about who got what? And that's kind of the way it would have been back there. He would have, even if he'd have got the second son's allotment, he would have had more than probably anybody in the area, and still been, if Jacob stayed around, he would have been the second richest man in the area. And so I don't think it was just about the money. It's also about the blessing. Who is the rightful heir to the father? And of course we know it's also who is the rightful heir to be the patriarch of the Jewish people. But, he says, isn't he rightly named Jacob? He has deceived me these 2 times. Now, a couple of things. First off, the name Jacob literally means he grabs. And it's the idea that it can also be translated as he deceives, because the whole idea is that it is somebody that doesn't just grab onto something to hold on to it, but somebody that snatches things out of your hands, reach out and grabs it away, takes it away. And sometimes even by deception. And that's kind of the root of the word. So that's what he says. And, isn't he called the grabber? And he grabbed these things away from me 2 times. Now, he really didn't do it twice. Now, he did it once with getting this blessing, but the birthright, Jacob didn't deceive that. There's nothing deceptive in any of the things. He actually says it to him twice. Esau agreed to it twice, to give it up. And the Bible even tells us that Esau despised it. He didn't have any concern for it. And now, as we say, it came back to bite him. And so, he's seeing that he's taken the birthright, he's taken the blessing, he's taken everything away. And he's telling his father, don't you have something? Surely You have something for me. Isaac's telling him, everything I gave you, everything that I gave him, I gave him new grain, good crops. I gave him new wine, the grapes and things would flow, and that there would be new crops of grapes every year. He said, I gave him that all of his descendants would serve him, and basically saying, and that includes you. So he says, so if I gave him crops, if I gave him wine, if I gave him water, the dew of the earth, and made him Lord over everything, what else is there to give? And Esau just breaks out and says, surely there is something, surely there's something. Bless me too, my father. And he wept aloud. Now, one of the things I want to kind of point out a little bit is Esau had his faults. And I don't want you to think of Esau at this point in time as being a little boy. He is not a boy. He has got quite a few years on him. He's already been married twice, and I don't mean married, divorced, married again. He has 2 wives, and he may even have a family by this time. So, a lot of times you see these stories, and these guys are teenagers. They would not have been teenagers. They might have been 30, 40 years old or so. And so here we are, and now he's about to lose all these things, and he is sobbing out loud. Now, the one thing that we see through all of this is that he honored his father. He had respect for his father. Because how many people you think when he said, it was your brother came and took your blessing, and he puts it all on Jacob. He said, isn't he rightfully called the grabber, and he grabbed these things away? But the one thing we don't see him doing is lashing out at his father, of saying, how could you not tell your 2 sons apart? How could you not know it was me? Are you that stupid? You're not that old yet. And, and there's a lot of people get into those kind of things. So he never pushes back. He never finds fault with his father. You can tell he still had respect for Isaac, was still close to Isaac, because in all of this passage, there is no disrespect at all. I mean, he knows he's lost the thing that he wanted the most. His brother has deceived his father and got it from him, but he never disrespects his father. And so we get to 39, and here he is weeping aloud. And that means he's weeping loud enough that everybody in the camp is going to hear him. So verse 39, his father Isaac answered him, your dwelling will be away from the earth's riches, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke off your neck. So he's telling him, you're not going to be in fertile areas. I've already promised the fertile areas to your brother. So you're not going to be where the ground is good, and you're not going to be where, the dew of heaven above, the rain is going to come. And so if you got a place that doesn't have good soil and doesn't have rain, what do we call that? A desert. And that's exactly where his descendants ended up, south of Israel, and in the country of Edom, that has his name, the country of red, which, just kind of put it a little bit into perspective with you, that's where Petra, if you hear about Petra, the rock city where the people lived up in the cliffs and all those things, and that was Edom also. And they were a warrior bunch. It says, you will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you go restless, you'll throw it in. So, every once in a while, you're going to rebel a little bit. You'll have a little bit of freedom, but then you're still going to go back to serving him. And we know, as we're going to see later on, when Jacob returns from Laban, that Esau had warriors with him. He was a sword person, and truly was a kind of a military warlord type thing. It doesn't say that he was bad, but that he shows up with men that were armed, and Jacob was afraid of what would occur. So, in everything, there are consequences to what we do. And we've just seen the consequences of what Esau did with just blowing off his birthright over a bowl of stew, like maybe a lot. And at that time, they probably were teenagers. A lot of years have passed between then and the passage we're reading now. So, verse 41, Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, your brother Esau is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day? Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I am disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living. So, Esau has suffered the consequences of what he did. Now, we see that Jacob is going to suffer the consequences of what he did. And so Esau has a plan. And again, we see his concern and his feelings for his father, because he's going to kill his brother. You know, we call that revenge killing. That's what he's going to do. But when's he going to do it? After his father dies. And even at this point, they're still wondering, you know, he says, the days of mourning for my father are near. He's going to die pretty soon. And when he dies, I'm going to kill my brother. When the days of mourning are over, then his day is done. And it says that he said it to himself, but somehow or another it got out. Whether somebody else heard it, you know, and heard him mumbling it under his breath, or whether he confided in some of his friends or some of his servants or some that were around. We don't know. It says that he said it to himself, and that was probably at Isaac's side when he lost the blessing. But days pass, and word gets to Rebekah that you have one son that's planning on killing your other son. And just like any mother, she called for Jacob and said, your brother's going to kill you. You need to get the heck out of here. You need to go to my brother Laban. You know, you need to go to family, long ways away, stay there. And then what's interesting about it is she says, this won't be very long. She said, you know, he's consoling himself with the thought of killing you. And stay with Laban for a while until your brother's fury subsides. And actually what it says in the original language is for a number of days, for a few days, what we would say, stay with your uncle for a few days. This is going to pass. When he gets over it, which kind of makes me wonder if if Esau wasn't one of those people that flies off the handle, says stuff, does stuff, and then once you give him time to cool off, it kind of goes away and it's gone. Because that's kind of what seems like Rebekah is thinking here. So she tells him, you know, when your brother's no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, then I will send for you and fetch you back here. So, which means I'm going to send servants to get you. They will bring you back. You know, you have to leave by yourself. You're going to come back with the servants and things to show you're back in the family and all those kind of things. But notice who she said did this. She says, when your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him. Who was behind the whole thing? It was Rebekah. Rebekah said, go get the goats. Rebekah cooked the goats. Rebekah made the skins for the hand and the back. Rebekah went and got Esau's clothes and put them on Jacob. But Rebekah's the one that took Jacob to the tent, put the food in his hand and said, you know, get yourself in there and do what I told you to do. But for whatever reason, She is not, at this point, she's not really taking the blame. Or the other thing, the way to look at it, which I think makes more sense, is she's saying, it doesn't matter whether I tell him I was behind this or not. He's going to blame you. He's blaming you. As far as he's concerned, you did it, and nobody is going to change his mind. So now she says, why should I lose both of you in one day? Now that's a source of confusion for a lot of scholars and people that study the Bible, because there's different possibilities. One of them is that Isaac dies, and that day Jacob, because you got to remember that back then, and actually in that part of the world today, they don't have a death on one day and a funeral on the next, or a funeral a week later, or a memorial service. You die, you're buried, it's over. Same day. And actually, it's in the Jewish law that comes up later. It wasn't that in effect at this time. That if somebody dies, they're to be buried before sunset. And that's still in effect today. And just a good example for some of you that are probably in your 50s or older, mostly 60s, 70s. You remember the Munich Olympics when the terrorists went in and captured the athletic dormitory and took some Germans hostage, took some Jewish hostages in Germany and ended up killing them. And when the Jews got them, I don't know if you probably all remember that part, but what you may not realize is that it's really close to go from Munich down to Tel Aviv, which is where the main airport is in Israel, almost up and down. They didn't go that way. They went all the way around the earth with some pretty high-powered jets with the bodies in them, so that they stayed in the daylight until they got to Israel, so that they were buried before the sun went down. So the reason I'm telling you that is to understand it was kind of that way back then. It wasn't like we do today. So to say that I could lose them both in one day is that Isaac dies, they put him in the tomb, he turns around, and he kills, and then Esau kills Jacob that same day. One of the other possibilities that they say is that she is referring to both of the sons, that Esau kills Jacob, and then, then Esau has to be put to death for committing capital murder, so that she could lose both of her sons. And the same thing back then, they didn't have a trial. You didn't kill somebody, and it's 2 years before you go to trial. They grabbed you up, they took you in front of the council or whoever's in charge, and they heard what you had to say, what everybody else had to say, it was over. And then typically it was stoning or having your head cut off. So, that's part of it right there, is that she would lose one son as he was killed by his brother, and that brother's life would be taken by society for and what we call the death penalty. Now, the last possibility is that that Esau would kill Jacob, and then that would break the bond between his mother and he, that she would not be able to accept her son as the murderer of his brother, and that their relationship would be gone. I don't think it really matters which one of those. Rebecca is basically saying there's not going to be a murder in the house, whether it's 1, 2, 3, whatever. And so being who she was, she doesn't just send him. Some people make it sound like she packs all this food on his back and says, get, he lives that way, go, and that sort of thing. She does not do that, because officially she's still not in charge. Isaac is in charge. And they lived in a patriarchal society. So basically, among the family, the oldest dad, he is literally the king. And nobody can do anything without his permission. When it comes to going places, staying places, if you're going to move away, now once he dies, the sons underneath him can go whatever direction they want to go. As long as he's alive, they still live there. And kind of like that old show Dallas, remember, when everybody lived in the same house? It didn't work in Dallas, and it didn't hardly work back in Beersheba either with these folks. So, being the smart woman that she was, she goes to Isaac. She's got a plan. And I'll flip the page back here. This is the end of chapter 26. When Esau was 40, so remember I told you they're not young. They were past 40 years old. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. They were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah. So, at this point, they're over 40. And at this point, we see that the Hittite women that Esau had, his wife, was a source of grief for Isaac and Rebekah. So, Rebekah is going to capitalize on that. And, she can't just go in and tell Isaac, you got one son that's planning to kill the other one, I'm going to send him away. Because that would have just been a whole big deal. And she thinks she's got it settled. Because she, as we see, she thinks that it's finally going to blow up or dry up and blow away. And it's not going to be an issue. And then Jacob can come home. We're going to be one big happy family all over again and all of that. Now, she's wrong about that part. But so if she makes a big deal out of it, then they won't ever be able to reunite. So she doesn't want to get there. She doesn't think this is going to go. She thinks that he is just blowing off. But he's still angry. So she wants the anger to subside. She thinks it's only going to be a few days. So she sends Jacob off. But in order to do that, she's got to have Isaac's permission. So she goes in, as we see here in verse 46, and says, I am disgusted with these Hittite women. And she's talking about her daughters-in-law. And if Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from the Hittite women like these, Esau's wives, my life will not be worth living. And there's a couple things about that. We talked about it when we saw that Esau took those Hittite wives. That was not, it was the one thing in which he showed he was not concerned with the family heritage, the plan of God, and all of that, because the Hittite women were supposed to be involved in all that. Rebekah came from where? She came from the home place. She came from relatives. And so that was supposed to be the plan. Esau didn't do it. He's got a little rebellious streak in him. He went and got his own wives, obviously without his mother and father's permission, which is supposed to happen back then and all that. And they've been nothing but a problem between them. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were bad women, but it might have meant that it could have meant they were bad women, and there just was not a good mother-daughter-in-law relationship there. But it also can mean that their customs kept interfering with what they were trying to establish in their families. And like we talked about before, it's like bringing someone with a totally different faith into the family, and they're trying to convert the whole family to their faith rather than being converted to the family faith. That kind of thing. Whatever it was, Isaac felt the same way. That's what we just read, that they were a source of distress to both of them. So she's going to capitalize on that, and that's what she does. She goes in and says, this can't happen again. Time for this boy to get married. He needs to do just what you need to do, what your dad did for you. You need to do that for your son. And so either she convinced Jacob. It doesn't look like it took much convincing that's what needed to do, because we move on with chapter 28, and it continues the story. It says, so Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him and commanded him, do not marry Canaanite women. Go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel. Take a wife for yourself there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants a blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now live as an alien, the land God gave to Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Padan Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who was the mother of Jacob and Esau. So, Isaac buys right into it. Probably was his plan anyway, would be my guess. That's totally a guess. But that looks like that was what it was. So he calls Jacob in, tells him what he needs to do, that you need to go and get a wife. Now, it's kind of different here because if you remember, for Rebekah and Isaac, Abraham sent servants to find the wife to bring her back. Here, he's going to where the wives are to pick his own wife, and that is really out of the ordinary. So we see that going on. So he tells him to go to Padan Aram, to Laban's house, to his uncle, his mother's brother, pick one of his daughters. Today we would call those cousins, and so he goes to looking for them, or he gets ready to go that way. And then it's not just that he called him in and sent him on his way, bless you with safe travels and, nice weather and all those sort of things. He lays the big blessing on him. And what I mean by that, this is the Abrahamic blessing. Now, he's blessed him with good crops, plenty of wine, which is what they drank like water, because the water was so bad. The rains, that everybody's going to serve him, I got to watch over him, all those kind of things. Now, as he's getting ready to go, because remember, Abraham thinks he may be gone any day, and he gives him the blessing. And God Almighty, that's the word El Shaddai, and that's if you ever heard that term, Amy Grant had a song out about that back when I was in high school. So I started to say it's a contemporary song, but that's not real contemporary anymore. But so God Almighty, and he said, may he bless you and watch over you until you become a community of people. So there it is. The God make your descendants great, and this ends up being the stars in the sky for Abraham, the sand on the seashore, all those sort of things. And may he give you and your descendants the blessing, the promises given to Abraham. And what's interesting too, he says, may he give you the land he gave Abraham. Did God give Abraham any land? Well, the answer to that's actually no. What he gave to Abraham, he didn't give to Abraham. He gave him the land, but he gave it to his descendants. And even with Isaac owned no land. The only land they owned was where the cave at Machpelah, where the family tomb was. And other than that, they did not own any land. But God had promised it to their descendants. And so now God had given it to Abraham. Then Abraham gave it to Isaac. God confirmed it with Isaac. Now Isaac gives it to Jacob as Jacob gets ready to go on his way. Because he tells him, may he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so you may take possession of the land where you now live as an alien. So he says, God gave Abraham this land. You're an alien here. You don't belong here. You're not one of these people. You are an alien. That's part of the reason why you need to go back and get somebody that's also an alien, that's from our family, to come back and to be your spouse. And return. And so he tells him that he going to the brother of Rebekah. Now, it doesn't sound like much. You need to go back to your mom's hometown, search out the family, find your uncle, because he wouldn't have had any clue what he looked like. And probably Rebekah couldn't explain to you much either. She's not seen him for 60 years. Because if you remember, she and Isaac were married for 20 years before they had children. And now it was Esau was 40 before he had wives. And this is after that. So it's been a long time since she's seen her brother. And so, he may not even live in the same place. And the other thing about it that we forget is, this was going to be quite a journey. It's about 500 miles. It depends on where you think that they actually were and where you think that Laban really might have been. There are some areas you can kind of massage them around. But it was somewhere between 500 to 700 miles. Some people say 8. Some people take it a little bit farther than that. But the point of it is, it's a long ways. And just stop and think about that. That's in today's realm, it's about a day's driving a car. And but he wasn't driving a car. He was walking. And if you were hustling, if you were by yourself and you were traveling light, which they basically traveled light, just literally what was on your back or what you could carry, you might be able to do 15, 20 miles a day, depending on what kind of shape you're in. You might be able to do 20 miles for 2 or 3 days, have to take a rest, maybe cut back and all that. So do this. It's going to take him quite a while to get there. 2, 3, 4 months that he's going to be walking to there. Now, the other thing is, where are you going to eat? Where are you going to sleep? Where are you going to stay? And does he know the way to get there? He's never been out of the camp, basically. Remember, he was one to stay. He was a busybody. Or not a busybody. He was a homebody. He didn't leave the tents. Esau went out hunting, but he didn't leave the area either. And I told you not too long ago that one of the unique things about Isaac is he is the only one of the patriarchs that never left the promised land. So that means up to this time, Jacob's never left the promised land. And so, you traveled along, you asked everybody as you went, so which way do I go now? And so, depending on the hospitality of strangers, you hope that nothing happened to you along the way. And then you wondered if you're ever going to get back and all that. So that's about the way he's packing up. He's getting ready to leave. So we have now verse 6. Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and had sent him to Padan Aram to take a wife from there, and that when he blessed him, he commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman. The Hittites were part of the Canaanites. And that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and gone to Padan Aram. Esau then realized how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father Isaac. So he went to Ishmael and married Mahalath, the sister of Nebaioth, and the daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, in addition to the wives he already had. So Esau is beginning to reflect back on his life and some of his mistakes. And so one of the things he notices as he's had what we call a rude awakening. And so he sees that his father, even with all this, even with everything that happened, his father sent him back to Padan Aram, back to the family, to get a wife, and told him, do not marry a Canaanite woman, as Esau had done twice. So, and it also says that his father told him, he realizes that Isaac told Jacob, do not marry a Canaanite woman, and that he obeyed his father, and that he had left and gone to do that. So then it says Esau realized how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father, and he realized that he really goofed up. So what it tells us is that if Esau says that he watched that his father sent his brother back home to get a wife, and blessed him on his way to do that, and told him, don't marry a Canaanite woman, and that he obeyed his father, the way that it's written means that message may have been given to Esau as well, being told, don't marry one of these local girls. When it comes time to marry, we'll take care of it. Don't marry one of these local girls. And of course, he married 2 of them. And now he's seeing how displeased they are. And, to me, This is another one of those people or people things. There are a lot of times that there are family, it's a good way to put it. There are a lot of times that there is things may not be good between in-law, father and a son-in-law, mother and a daughter-in-law, different ones along that line. Maybe, brother to sister-in-law or whatever. And a lot of times that person that is married to that other person is the last one to know, because nobody wants to tell them. And so they don't realize that it's bad when it is. And it seems like that's what happens with Esau, because he's just now realizing, oh man, they are displeasing. Because it says in verse 8, Esau then realized how displeasing the Canaanite were to his father Isaac. And again, all of the respect is about his father. His relationship is really with his father. And even at this point, he sees that Jacob obeyed his father, was blessed by his father, and all that. He never goes back and says anything about it. He sees now that these women are displeasing to his father, but the Bible tells us twice that they weren't just displeasing to his father, they were also displeasing to his mother. But he never mentions his mother. He mentions his father. So what does he do? He tries to close the barn door after the horse is out. He goes to family. Remember what Isaac is doing? Sending Jacob back to family to get married. So what does he do? He goes to family to get married. But he goes the other way. Instead of going, because remember, he's close to his father. He's identifying from his father's side. Jacob, with his mother, he goes to his mother's side. And that's the way that mom has set it up here. So Esau goes to Ishmael's descendants. Now, Ishmael's already died. We read that a chapter or so back. But his family is still there. And Ishmael would have been one of Isaac's uncles. And then these children would be cousins the other way on the paternal side, where Rebekah's sending Jacob for a cousin on the maternal side. And so this whole thing about that, he went to Ishmael and married Mahalath, the sister of Nebaioth and daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, in addition to the wives he already had. So he's saying that I need to have a wife from within the family. He's back to trying to please his father. Doesn't seem to care about his mother, but he's wanting to please his father. So he goes and gets another wife that is from the family to try to impress his father that he's trying to do the right thing. So now we get in that whole thing about Jacob's ladder. And we'll talk about whether it's really called a ladder or a stairway or whatever when we get there. So Jacob left Beersheba. That's where they were living. That is the southernmost tip of the nation of Israel in ancient times, and it's disputed today. But so he sets out for Haran. He takes off on his 500 or 600 mile trip, and he is going by himself, which is the interesting thing about it. They did not send him with a whole lot of stuff. They could have sent a whole caravan with him, but they didn't, and because Rebecca thinks it's only going to be for a few days, and then I'll send for you and you'll come back. So anyway, Jacob left Beersheba, set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream, which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So Jacob takes off. He's a couple days journey by this time. This isn't the first night, and he reaches a place. Now, one of the interesting things is kind of a play on words in the Bible, because a lot of the Jewish people in the past and even some of them today call God the place. And that, and we kind of talk about that too. God being a place of refuge, a place of hope, a place of forgiveness, a place that being with God is being in a place, and almost in a it's a state of mind or a state of spirit or whatever. So he reached a place, and he stopped for the night because the sun had set. So he's pushing her down to the end. He's not knocking off a couple hours easy, kicking back and relaxing. He's walking till it was over. It also says, lets us know that he's not taking a whole lot of things with him, because what does he use for a pillow? He uses a stone. There's an old song, I think it's When We All Get to Heaven, and there's a line in it that says, this world is not my home, but like a prophet, my pillow's a stone. Did you ever think of using a stone for a pillow? Sometimes if you're out camping and things like that, if you get one the right size, you can put your coat or something like that on it to get your head from just dipping down all the time. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So he puts it under his head, he lays down to sleep, and he has a dream in which he sees a stairway or a ladder. And this is the reason that it's not really translated real well, stairway, ladder, whatever, is the word that is used to designate whatever he saw. This is the only place in the Bible that it is used. It's the only place in the ancient Hebrew language it was used. They've tried to compare it with some other things, including some other languages of that area of the time, and the best they can tell is that it meant a stairway. And so he sees this stairway, or some of the old King James called it a ladder, and that's kind of where that comes from. But he's having a dream, and this stairway resting on the earth, it's sitting on the earth, reaching all the way up to heaven. So, how far did it go up? Who knows? Did it go so far that you couldn't see the end of it anymore? Did it go into a cloud? Did it go, there's a lot of different renditions of that in paintings and illustrations and things. And it doesn't matter whether, if you can see the end of it or how the end of it was. What was interesting was he saw angels on it, and the angels were ascending and descending. The ladder, the stairway, the whatever. Could have been an elevator. It wasn't an elevator, just being a smart aleck. But the whole point of it was just some way to get from the earth into heaven. Now, this is also one of those things that, the book of Genesis especially, and then the book of Exodus, and as well, speaks of angels. Now, one of the things they got into in Jesus' day is the Sadducees, which were the ones that were in power, and the priests and all that. They didn't believe in angels. They said they only believed what was in the first 5 books of the Bible, what we call the laws of Moses, the Torah, whatever. And here, this is one of the biggest stories in there, that Jacob is seeing angels going up and down to heaven. Now, the last thing I want to talk about that real quick is that everybody thinks, I'm going to ask you a question, and you don't have to answer it because I can't hardly see all the answers on there anyway, and by the time you all typed it, we'd be done. Where do angels live? Almost all of you said heaven. Not according to this story. What did the angels use the ladder for? To go back and forth to heaven. But where do they start? The Bible says that they ascended and then descended. It doesn't say they descended and ascended. So what it is indicating is they started off on the earth. They went to heaven, to check in, to get orders, to do whatever it is that they were doing in heaven. They came back to earth. That the angels, now there are heavenly creatures. We talked about some of those when we went through the book of Revelation and all that. But when we read about angels, do we read about them in heaven? No. We read about the angels that spoke to Moses, or to Matthew. I'll get it right in a minute. To Joseph in the book of Matthew, to Mary, to Daniel, the one that stands before Balak as he's trying to go on his little donkey to curse the people. We don't read about angels in heaven. We read about angels on earth. And so what it is saying here, the angels on earth, they go up to heaven to find out, to do whatever it is they got to do, and then they come down. So they start and they stop on the earth. I bet you never thought about that. But that's what it says. And there it says, 12, in verse 12, he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. The angels of God were ascending and descending on it. So this whole idea of angels being in heaven, the other thing that I would throw out there too, and just kind of, just throwing it out there for you to think about it. If angels have wings, why do they need a stairway? Do you ever think about that? There is nothing in the Bible about the angels having wings. That just come from the whole idea that angels, that talks about angel flights and different things like that. Well, if you fly, then, you got to have wings. And so people came to believe that angels have wings. And so here, that's what I come back to. If they had wings, they'd fly back to heaven and fly back to earth. But they ascend and they descend. They start at earth, they go to heaven, they come back to earth. Angels are about the earth, because that word, whether you go back to the old Hebrew word or the Greek word that's in the New Testament, the word angel literally means messenger of God. Actually, in the Greek, it's angelos, almost like Angeles, like in Los Angeles, the city of angels. That's what that means in Spanish, the angels. I would dispute that title in that town today, but anyway, these are messengers of God. These are people that are carrying out God's wishes, and they need to do it on earth because everybody's carrying them out in heaven. They're here to assist people, to guide people, and to do whatever God has them to do. They start at earth, they go to heaven, they come back to earth. So, if nothing else, I hope you learned something new with that. Next week we'll start with verse 13, and we'll proceed from there. We got quite a bit done tonight, man. And so almost got a full chapter in, but. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed being with you. If you have a chance, watch Channel 2 News tonight. They did a story on the church today. And Steve was interviewed in the church. And then they had a Zoom interview with me about 1:30 or 1:45 today and talked over some things. So looking forward to see what that had to say. Of course, it came down to either watch the news or talk to you folks, and you won out, but the recorder got it. So when this is over, I'll probably be watching it. So anyway, go out, be blessed, be a blessing to others. And we'll catch up with you online on Wednesday, or we'll be in church on Sunday. See you then.